Some of the other really repulsive news being reported by Breitbart and others is that Jerry Brown has come out publicly and said that giving illegals driver's license is so they can vote and is so they can just legalize them all. 700+ million Latin Americans who, if they get government funding, will vote to take my guns, and I've got to pay for it. This is just slavery. The Democratic Party just brings people in to vote to make me their slave. It'll be like France soon with 100% taxes if you work. And then you just live in your business and sleep on a cot. Or you go be homeless. Or you go on. It'll finally collapse. I mean, I just don't even know what to say. And now they're reporting Border Patrol rep claims agents being ordered to stand down. Well, that's come out for years that that's going on. Meanwhile, the Border Patrol is not allowed to stop illegals. They're only allowed to have Predator drones from the military base are now loaned to state and local police. That's been going on for a long time, and there's now federal lawsuits going on dealing with that. New American Magazine reports. So that's some of the news on that front. Shifting gears over to the Middle East. Libya in chaos 2 years after NATO's humanitarian liberation, putting al-Qaeda in charge. Also, diplomats have now gone public, RT reports. Saudi-backed Black Op team behind Damascus chem weapons attack. Yeah, that came out on record. Bandar Bush brags about it. He's quite proud of it. Continuing Syrian chemical weapons dismantlement to start next week. But the Russians are saying, okay, they'll turn over their legal chemical weapons to us, but will you please stop funding al-Qaeda to attack the country? So that is some of the news on the international front. Again, the video is up on Infowars.com, and it's also the middle column of DrudgeReport.com. Obama supporters don't know what party Obama is affiliated with. We played this clip earlier. I want to ask Dr. Pieczenik about this as a psychiatrist. Undoubtedly, the IQs are lowering. The public is physically getting stupider, not just their upbringing, not just their nurture, but their nature. What is happening? And what will these hordes of miscreants do to those of us that produce? Continuing here with some of the other news that we need to get to. Obama's economic advisor, there's a video of this up on our website, prisonplanet.com. Obama economic advisor says astronomical debt is constitutional. And of course, Obama says raising the debt is not raising the debt. I mean, we've actually entered through the looking glass into an Alice in Wonderland type scenario, ladies and gentlemen. It is really, really getting bizarre. We're about to go to Dr. Steve Pieczenik as soon as we get him on the line, and then we'll break all of this through the looking glass down with him. Because I didn't get him on because he's a psychiatrist today. I got him on because of his government background and his knowledge of geopolitics. But, man, I tell you, just looking at this, the public's acting squirrely all over. And I've talked to a lot of executives, a lot of medical doctors, a lot of people that deal with the public. They say it's not just me seeing this through the media, watching the news and studying it, but it's happening. We're seeing a madness in society because things are so unnatural. The government's above the law now, and that really screws people up. We'll get Dr. Pieczenik's expert take on that in a moment. First off, ladies and gentlemen, here today I want to tell you about VPN4all.com. That's the initials VPN and the number 4 all, VPN4all.com. During these crazy times with Big Brother spying on us, it's great to use a company like VPN for All to protect you with the buffer so that you have a proxy surfing, no records ever kept of your browsing, based in the Netherlands, free from the police state internet jurisdiction. That's why everybody's based over there. Easy to sign up and use. It's a great way to prevent data mining. Try it out for 3 months and you won't be disappointed. All info warriors need to go to VPN4all.com right now and protect their online privacy. That's VPN, the number 4, all.com. It's very inexpensive as well. They have it for mobiles, you name it. And finally, we have a new food sponsor. After 7 years, we have a new food sponsor just because I've tried the food. It's so good. And also, they're the ones that told FEMA. FEMA wanted to buy out all the food they could make. A bunch of other companies got contacted and shut up and sold only to the government, getting ready for the collapse or whatever they're doing. But My Patriot Supply contacted us and went public. They're a big company, been around for a long time. and I've used their food before, tried it out. I'm going with My Patriot Supply, and you can simply go to mypatriotsupply.com/Alex to find their specials. Giant selection of food. It's just good to have a backup storable food. The government's doing it. Corporations are doing it. We need to be self-sufficient. The globalists are doing everything they can, like Stalin taking over Ukraine or Poland, to make sure we're dependent on them. We need to have firearms, food, training. It's just a good insurance policy. And it's an insurance policy you can eat, so it's 100% good. They've got a lot of great savings and specials up at on Infowars.com. You can link through to the subpage there, or mypatriotsupply.com/Alex, mypatriotsupply.com/Alex. And it is the sponsors that make this show and this transmission possible. Now, we've got Dr. Pieczenik with us for the next 45 minutes, and we'll get into the Navy Yard shooting, and from his sources, what he's saying is really behind that, and the evidence it's a false flag. We'll do that in the next segment. We'll also get into other geopolitical things that are happening and get his unique perspective. Again, he's a top Harvard psychiatrist and also was an officer in the Navy before that. And he also has a medical degree as well. He's the former head of psychological warfare for the State Department and ran the Camp David Accords and is credited with getting the only successful peace deal really in history there at Camp David. So he's a really smart guy, a top psychiatrist, not a faux psychiatrist or psychologist. And he joins us. His website, stevepieczenik.com. Of course, he co-authored a lot of books and wrote some of his own bestsellers with Tom Clancy and has produced TV shows and movies with Tom Clancy and others. So he's a heavy hitter. It really doesn't need any introduction, but we have a lot of new listeners every millisecond. Doc, I don't know if you were on hold earlier because they just dialed you up, but I was breaking down the hysteria I saw with one woman who ran up to a military checkpoint, we now learned, temporary checkpoints in the Capitol, got scared, bumped up against it, didn't shoot at police, didn't kill 2 police, as they first said, or wound police later. We have video that we've shown of police driving straight down the road into barricades, concrete barricades, just mass mental illness. She got so terrified of them chasing her down the road, trying to run her off the road that she ran. They see the little 3-year-old in the car, they kill her, and then they have everybody running in fear for 30 minutes after. The wicked flee when none pursue. They go into the Capitol and have a standing ovation and say the police are heroes. They should have said it's unfortunate her car was dangerous. She was probably mentally ill, disturbed. We're sad she's dead, but thank God no one else was hurt. Instead, they said, we're heroes. In some weird, sweating, hysterical mental illness. And the Congress, the Senate looked mentally ill. And I'm no doctor, but I mean, I know crazy people when I see them. There's like a mass insanity, a megalomania, a drama queening. And I'm seeing it in the general public. We're seeing crack-ups increase. We're seeing all sorts of nuttiness. Dr. Pieczenik, A, do you agree with me? Or B, I mean, if you do agree, where is all this going? What's happening? Is this a collective madness like the Aztecs?
Well, let me put the incident yesterday about the woman going to the White House. Unlike the Navy or the Newtown, in my opinion, having been involved with in the incarceration of the mentally ill who have approached the White House and the Secret Service has justifiably tried to calm them down or try to bring them in for mental illness, I would say that yesterday's experience is a little bit different from what you portrayed it or most others. I've had extensive experience many decades ago of hospitalizing and having to hospitalize on behalf of the Secret Service appropriately mentally ill people who go up to the White House, approach the Secret Service, who have acted very professionally. They usually approach a car or a person who, like that woman, and I don't know that specific woman, but other cases where people would come up in the car, they would approach the White House, and before you knew it, the Secret Service would appropriately talk to the individual, and then you'd find out that they had guns in the back of their car, and the Secret Service then would whisk them away to my unit, maximum security at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C. I think that occasion yesterday was very similar to the cases that I have had and had to treat in conjunction with the Secret Service way before we had Obama or any other president, going back 30 or 40 years. It's a very difficult situation when you see a person, whether a woman or a man, whoever it be, comes up to the White House, drives up there with a car, intends to break through the barricade. And I know the Secret Service to be very professional in those cases. And they try to talk the person down. They don't immediately shoot at them. They don't immediately target the individual. That individual, for whatever reason, ran, and she was, let's assume, mentally ill. I would assume that, given the nature of her escape, went to the Capitol Hill and then rammed various elements of the Capitol Hill police. So that case was normally, if they apprehended her and she was not shot and somebody was not hurt, she would have been taken immediately to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, a federal institution. In those days, when I was there, under a military control, a public health service control, and would have been put in maximum security. So, Alex, I've had prisoners who've been, or mentally ill patients, who have been to the White House and wanted to see the president way before Bush or
No, we have them. We have them come to the office.
Wanted to see the president and were fully armed, and the Secret Service handled them very well and would very sensitively bring them over to St. Elizabeth's Hospital, where we would keep them in for 15 years because they were always a potential danger. So that's very different from a false flag like the Navy Yard, which I think is a false flag, or Newtown. And the reason I say that is because the chief of police, Lanyard, who's very professional, the head of the Metropolitan Police, said the first thing in a case like that yesterday, she said there's a gag order. In effect, she said we can't talk about who was involved, what happened, and the investigation. That did not occur in the Navy Yard or Newtown. When you have an immediate gag order, that's a federal prosecutorial involvement. The law comes in very quickly, and that means that you cannot even discuss the
Exactly.
case.
That's another telltale when they do whatever they want, that it's a staged event. I agree with you, and I know that the police not shooting her at first did show restraint. I'm talking about a nation that faced down the Soviet Union and nuclear war, and a nation that fought off 500,000 or 1 million Chinese in Korea, groveling in fear, and Congress people shaking and literally freaking out over the image of a woman driving in circles and bumping a few police. I'm talking about land of the free, home of the brave. What is the state of the mental psychology?
Okay, let me. You always bring me on the show, and I'm always grateful to be on it. But you bring me on to bring another perspective. First of all, we are the land of the free and the brave, but we did not do very well in Korea. One of the things that you have to remember, we went into Korea on a panic, and Truman did that very much as Obama went into Afghanistan without the permission or really the agreement of Congress. We went in as a, quote, a protective detail under the UN auspices. It was a disaster. And if it weren't
under General MacArthur.
Wait a minute,
sure.
Alex. If it weren't for President Eisenhower, who had been general and head of SACEUR, and a major military commander and the best of American politics, he stopped the war in Korea. Now, let me get back to Obama. The nature of Obama and the nature of what you're talking about is a very different issue. We have an ongoing fear situation, and part of it I will attribute to the nature and personality of the president himself. Obama came up with absolutely no resume, no legitimacy that would accord him the right to be anything, either a senator or professor at University of Chicago or anything, other than the fact that he had a background history of his parents and grandparents being in the CIA, and he had worked for those who had been in the CIA. That's all I can tell you. Secondly, he has created a scenario of fear and intimidation, which quite frankly, Alex, is what you're trying to get to and I was trying to get to, and that was saying, I have to go back into the history of all the presidents I had served. Bush, Reagan, Carter, Ford, even Nixon. I have never seen such fear and intimidation created by one president and one administration as I have by Obama. And I had to resort to another person. And you may be a little bit surprised, and your audience may not remember who I'm talking about. And I went back to a junior senator, which Obama was from Illinois, but this senator was in the 1950s, and you may not have been born then because you were too young, but I remember him very well, and his name was Eugene McCarthy.
Oh, yes.
And one of the things that I think your audience has to remember, and look up Eugene McCarthy, was he was a junior senator from Wyoming, I believe, or Wisconsin, I'm sorry.
It was Wisconsin.
Who intimidated everybody in the military, the intelligence community, the State Department, the domestic, our Library of Congress, our teachers, and accused them all of being communists, when in fact they weren't communists, when in fact there was no evidence. And unfortunately, General Eisenhower didn't do anything until some of our generals, who were major generals, who had been major heroes in our war, like World War II General Ralph Zwicker, who was a major hero and was wounded and was abused by McCarthy in front of a whole nation, and then finally a man by the name of Walsh from Boston, a prosecutor and a famous lawyer, said, "Have you no shame?" And finally McCarthy was thrown out, and Eisenhower had to act. No one has stood up to this president and has said to him, "Have you no shame? Have you no shame that you created a false scenario in Newtown in order to get gun control? Have you no shame that you created an unemployment scenario the likes of which we've never seen before? Have you no shame that you created a nonsensical Osama bin Laden assault and then allowed the CIA to create Zero Dark 30 by Catherine Bigelow, a false and nonsensical film? And have you no shame that there was nobody killed in Newtown and it never happened? And as a result of all of these false flags and intimidation, I now accuse the President of the United States, Obama, of being the new Democratic McCarthy. And along with his henchmen, Harry Reid and Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi, and also the Republicans, you have the extreme elements like Ted Cruz, who's born in Calgary and assumes that he can assume the mantle of American presidency? No. This Cuban-born or Canadian-born son of a Cuban exile who worked for Fidel Castro can never be president of the United States, nor can Marco Rubio, nor can Rand Paul. So the answer is, in a time of fear and intimidation, where are these young leaders? Where are the people who have some integrity, some commitment to having served our government in the military, not in the political arena, and given of themselves to our country and built their own companies? I don't see that, honestly, and that's what you're talking about. Obama will continue to create that fear and intimidation until the debt ceiling. And I will tell you one thing. More than anything else in the world, more than any issue of national security, either domestically or any false flag that he's pulled, and he's pulled a few of them, the biggest issue will be if we foreclose or we do not basically pay our debt and we do not increase the debt ceiling. The reason is horrendous. What will happen is America will default on its debt, and it will drive our currency down to zero. Every billionaire will be a pauper, and every pauper will be exactly what they were, a pauper. And our economy and the full faith and credit of the American government is gone. So this fear is getting played out in a chicky game between the Republicans on the extreme side, who have really no legitimacy of doing anything other than expansive rhetoric and bombastic, while the Democrats have done nothing. But we have a president who doesn't know how to deal with the opposite side. I give credit to Bill Clinton on many things I've disagreed with him, but his ability
Dr.
to
Pieczenik?
be able to talk to the opposite side has been quite formidable, as was LBJ, as was the Republican Reagan, who worked with O'Neill. So we don't have a president who really functions as a world leader or as a national leader or as a healer. We have a demagogue who's really in the picture of a McCarthy, using fear, intimidation, and false flags. Someone will have to stand up besides myself to say, have you no shame, Mr. President? Stop, cease, and desist. And that's why you have the unique opportunity, Alice, to say to your audience, This is what's happening today. And we're coming into an economic crisis that really will determine the outcome of where America will be.
Sure. Dr. Pieczenik, we got to go to break here. I already skipped one, and it's just killing the network because this information is so important, and I agree with you. But I've studied Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin. He really believed what he was doing was good, but that they did use it to persecute people and bring in another form of kind of right-wing tyranny. So I agree with you, it was bad in the final equation. But Obama is far worse, saying the founding fathers aren't welcome in our military and saying veterans are the main enemy and you didn't build your business, and increasing the debt doesn't increase the debt, and they have MSNBC say, I'm behind the Boston bombing. I mean, they are real hardcore authoritarians. Are we choosing our own destiny, or has it been pre-selected for us?
As we've moved through history, every great leader has had to understand the potential of information.
Billions of dollars have been spent privately and publicly looking at how to tap into your psyche.
From compulsory state education to the Hollywood media brainwashing machine, we are kept in perpetual bondage to the ideas that shape our actions.
When somebody obscures that feedback loop between you observing and testing it out and verifying it, they can take total control of your awareness.
All of this is happening so fast, you need to be ahead of the game.
How to engineer the opinion of the American people so that they would not only endorse but demand a war.
Oh, there's another plane just hit.
State of Mind, because there's a war on for your mind. Get your copy of State of Mind, the movie, at Infowars.com. And remember, every order at InfoWarsStore.com receives a free citizen rulebook. Okay, so what Dr. Pieczenik was getting to earlier, a psychiatrist and government insider, best-selling author, is the fear, the state of fear. I mean, I sent reporters to the NSA to their front gate yesterday. We had live feeds of it here, video feeds. And the police and military literally were like catching their breath and couldn't talk that someone would dare come to the gate and ask to talk to their public information officer about the illegal spying going on inside against Obama's political enemies and all of it. It was just so unthinkable that in land of the free, home of the brave, the police and military were going, you're not following my orders, because we knew the law. And it's this fear. They're so afraid. And police, they have studies out, think they're all about to be killed, even though their number one cause of death is automobile accident or training exercises, training incidents. And so he was getting into the state of fear. And I agree with what he said. They have so hyped the fear that now you can't wear an NRA shirt to school, just that says NRA, or they kick you out. Or if you write an essay about hunting with your dad, they arrest you. There's no law, but they still do it. It's authoritarianism under political correctness, and they know what they're doing. And I heard Obama wanted to come in and be a dictator and all this stuff, and I didn't buy it 6 years ago. I said, I know he's really bad. They're going to try to sell tyranny as trendy. But he really is. I mean, they really, a month ago with Judicial Watch, as you know, we're going to Dr. Pieczenik's take on this, got the documents where they teach everybody in the Army now, in the new manuals, that the founders are bad. It actually says they wouldn't be welcome in today's Army. I mean, that's so absurdist. George Washington founded the U.S. Army. It just shows we're really occupied by a bunch of corporate special interest that want to extinct American liberty and American exceptionalism, and who are turning us into a domesticated nanny state. So as a smart guy, Dr. Pieczenik, how do we reverse this? I mean, why are they so bold? Let me ask you the question. Why is MSNBC, I don't know if you saw it, and others saying, quote, Alex Jones is deeply racist, close quote, Alex Jones is behind the Boston bombing. My lawyer said I could sue and win, but I think it discredits him. I mean, what's happening with these people? Go ahead.
Well, what's happening, Alex, you and I know that you have been very effective in counter-punching the mainstream media that's been buying up most of the stories from any administration. But the point here, Alex, is, and with all due respect to you, as you and I know, we go back 10, 12 years, and to your audience, what you don't want to do is play the fear game. I mean, Alex Jones is not behind any covert operations. Alex Jones is not behind any nefarious deed. you are practicing your First Amendment right. The issue, though, with the NSA, and let me give your audience a little break here. You know, I have been concerned about the surveillance program, but I do know some of the issues and personnel involved. So let me give you a little fresh air here and a breath, so your audience doesn't get fearful. You may have sent people to the NSA front door, but the truth of the matter is that most of your audience, the Americans, had watched only 3 days ago, which I'm sure most Americans did not watch, the Senate hearings that were run by Leahy and Senator Grassley and Senator Whitehouse, all of whom were really quite sophisticated and asked the same questions you did in a very professional, sophisticated manner. They asked James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, who's been criticized, and General Keith Alexander, who's the head of the National Security Agency and Idaho Cyber Command, what are the issues involved and why are you tracking specific phone numbers in the United States? And I will say that because of your show and because of the people who listen to your show, these representatives have been very effective in asking those very questions that you said to both James Clapper and Keith Alexander. And in turn, both of those gentlemen answered the questions and admitted they made mistakes. They admitted that they had inadvertently picked up 9 to 12 illegal calls. General Keith Alexander, whom I know, is a very conscientious, very professional intelligence head. And James Clapper was, reprimanded before, but he was very articulate. The person who was not articulate and came back with fear and totally inappropriate was an 80-year-old wicked witch from the West named Dianne Feinstein, who shocked everybody in the room, and even me, when she said, I remember when George Tenet 10 years ago told me about an impending attack in July of 2001, and it happened 3 months later. Who in God's name needed Dianne Feinstein? She should have been thrown out. She should have been voted out. That's the job of the American people. But the American people, thanks to you and others, have voted in people like Leahy, Grassley, Whitehouse, and have put controls on the shift of power towards the executive branch and have forced these people to answer questions. General Keith Alexander answered everything he had to answer and went back to FISA. In turn, Chief Justice Roberts was criticized by me and others for appointing 10, 11 judges, all of whom were Republicans and male, and all of whom had the similar opinion. Well, when they were reprimanded by the American people and the legislators, guess what? Chief Justice Roberts changed, and he put in people who had countervailing views. So I want to offer to your audience and to you, and thanks to you, Alex.
Oh, please stop thanking me.
For them, for the audience to say, we're going to write to our congressmen and senators, and if you don't like them, like Dianne Feinstein or Nancy Pelosi or Mark Rubio or Ted Cruz, who are totally not appropriate, get people in there who are functional, who are value-added, who are serious, who can create legislation and implement it. That's the job of the American people. I don't believe they're totally dumbed down. I believe that there's too much fear, and all you have to say is what you said, Alex. It's enough. And guys like me and you have to say, you know what? The American public has a job to continuously press on their legislators, to press on the executive branch to say, we don't need this. We don't need 9,000 people in the State Department. We don't need $90 billion of communications to Booz Allen. I don't need Amazon.com to get $600 million for security, internet security. But that's the job of the American people.
Yeah, well, these private interests are making themselves government and getting the contracts. But let's shift gears on why you're here, and I appreciate you getting off into the NSA. But I got to ask, why are you mad at Ted Cruz? I really like what he's doing, but I don't want to digress.
I don't like Ted Cruz, and I'll tell you why. I'm Cuban. I'm born in Cuba. I fought Castro. Ted Cruz did not fight Castro. He's born in Calgary, Canada. He's a demagogue. His father's a demagogue. If you listen to his father's ranting and raving, this is a father who not only fought Batista, but also worked with Fidel Castro and then claimed he was disappointed and came back in 1979 and was disillusioned. What are you talking to me about? Bombastic Cuban exiles who come back and then go to Calgary, Canada.
No, I know your family had to flee Cuba. I understand all that.
Go into the oil business and tell me, a Cuban who had to fight Castro, who never said a word about it, and telling me and the American public that he's an American who's going to be our president. First of all, he's Canadian. Secondly, he has never served our country. Thirdly, his bombastic rhetoric does not serve the purpose of the nation state. The fact that Cruz and others can shoot their mouths off and may have had a Cuban or Hispanic heritage does not constitute the grounds for election. It's the same way we say we picked Obama because he's black, or we're going to pick Hillary because she's a woman. That is not sufficient and necessary to be president of the United States.
Well, I like his filibuster, but let's get into the Navy Yard, because that's where you've got bombshell info.
The Navy Yard is a false flag. It's very simple, because when you have a diagnosis and you don't have a gag order and you have the name of a person beforehand whose name is, beginning with 2 A's, I mean, you already know this thing doesn't make any sense. In contrast to yesterday, where there was a gag order, very immediately you saw the chase, you saw the consequences. But under the Navy order, what you have here again is fear. And what happened here, let's look at the overall picture. Why did they create a stand down a false flag in the Navy Yard? Because you have a CNO, Chief of Naval Operations, named Jonathan Greenert, who's nothing more than a protege of another Chief of Naval Operations who did nothing but false flags and false stories, Admiral Mullen, who wanted to make the SEAL Team 6 look great. Well, he failed. He failed because the Navy has a real problem. They don't belong within our force structure. We really don't know where the Navy belongs when the Army is on the ground, that's boots on the ground, and we have an Air Force that basically can do everything the Navy does with missiles, with drones, and we don't need aircraft carriers. We don't need destroyers. We don't need littoral ships. And by the way, the only thing we might need is a submarine, and he's a submarine commander. Furthermore, Admiral Greenert was reprimanded, again, by a U.S. Senator, Carl Levin, for having spent billions of dollars of wasted money on construction that we don't need. I go back to our legislators. You have to go back to hit them, and they're the ones.
Sure, but go over it, because they ordered the stand down of the SWAT team. The ATF's not allowed in. The whole thing looks very fake to me. I agree with you in the timing with the sequestration, but explain how that false flag works to a layperson out there.
A false flag is the following. You create an incident that didn't exist, and you immediately create a narrative. That's where Alex and I agree. The narrative begins with, we know who the person is. Well, that's amazing that you know the person. Not only do we know everything about the person, but we know his diagnosis. He's psychotic. He's delusional. He was hearing. He was listening to microwaves, and at the same time, he won 2 awards while he was a reservist in the Navy. One for terrorism and one for combat. All of which is inconsistent in the narrative. It doesn't even work in fiction. So when
and he's too old to start going crazy like this, and at the same time, as you know, claiming he's schizophrenic or whatever, at the same time,
it doesn't work. Correct.
But I mean, plus they ordered the SWAT team to stand down, but also the police reportedly came out multiple times with him saying they're after him in a hotel, but then they let him keep his top secret security clearance?
It wasn't top secret, it was secret. He would never have received the secret clearance. He never would have received medals. He never would have gotten a contract, and the contract was with one of the companies that's really in trouble as an outsourcing company. And everybody works together. It's the military-industrial complex which has to be taken down, and that's why we need a president who understands all of these issues. And I go back to Eisenhower, not because I think he's the greatest, but he was one of the few presidents who understood the danger of the military-industrial complex. In this case, the Aaron, or the so-called attacker, worked for Hewlett-Packard, or subcontracted to Hewlett-Packard. So Hewlett-Packard's in trouble. Hewlett-Packard has contracts from our military and our intelligence community. So does Booz Allen. So does Carlyle Group. These contracts have to be stopped. But they have to be stopped by legislators.
Sure. Let's talk about Syria. You know, you knew the older Assad. I think you were even arrested once there, weren't you? And then you knew the younger Assad. I'm not a fan of Assad, but
I was arrested there. That's correct. I was held in interrogation in Bashar al-Assad. That's correct.
But I mean, my issue is I'm not a fan of Assad, but they are leaving the Christians and the Jews alone and are great compared to al-Qaeda. How will the West, with its narrative, get away with openly arming al-Qaeda as the main force?
They can't. Thanks to you and others, Alex, the West has ceased and desist. They were warned by myself and others who understood the Syrian situation that this was really a CIA intervention that didn't work. And I must admit, I was very disappointed with General Petraeus, who thought that he could arm the so-called moderates. There are no moderates in this kind of chaos. And at the same time, Hillary Clinton, who knew nothing, also wanted to arm the so-called moderates. In this kind of situation where we, the United States, created al-Qaeda, al-Qaeda's fighting another group that we created, the Northern Syrian Liberation, but it doesn't matter. There are all kinds of acronyms and all kinds of names for different kinds of... The
worst are always going to take over in a situation. So the plans divide and conquer, but that's not even going well.
No. Basically, my concern was from day one, and I've said it on your show previously, is that there are millions of Christians and there are millions of Alawites who are basically Shiites who have been dispossessed, who have been killed. The minute that Sunnis come out of homes, which is funded by Saudi Arabia, I can't emphasize enough, our biggest nemesis in the Middle East is Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates.
Oh, yeah, by the way, they've had Saudi intelligence. Let me ask you.
Saudis are the biggest problems because we needed them in the past for oil. As of yesterday, the Wall Street Journal correctly announced that America is a net exporter of oil and gas. We don't need anybody anymore. So we should let Saudi Arabia go. Unfortunately, Israel has a relationship with Saudi Arabia. Israel has a relationship with the UAE and Qatar. We must stay out of the Middle East. We have to shift to the east, but we're still in the Middle East, whereas none of those countries are really of a strategic alliance. But again, we have people in this administration who are not really confident. John Kerry is not confident.
Well, they've sold out. Look at how they're letting the Chinese have Australia.
Well, Chinese have spread all over the world. It's not even an issue that they have Australia, they have Africa, they have East Africa, they have West Africa, they have the Middle East. When I was even in Syria and in Iran a few years ago, and in Isfahan and Shiraz in Iran, they were selling products that the Iranians thought were Iranian, that were cheap. I said, no, they're Chinese. Chinese came into Turkey and Burgas and basically undercut 1,000 different factories and textiles. The Chinese financially have been able to cut everybody. But the good news is that China is really an internal problem, and they have to depend on the United States. Contrary to what everybody believes, the United States has really funded the Chinese in terms of water and food, and China has a very serious internal civil unrest because in a normal year, the Chinese have over 75,000 riots.
I think it's more like a month now they're having that. But why did I think it's evil that our system helped put Mao in power. I think that was a bad mistake.
Well, it's an interesting point, Alice. It's a historical mistake, but it's the same way our system made mistakes. John Foster Dulles didn't understand what General Stilwell and those of us who fought with Mao during World War II against the Japanese. And Chiang Kai-shek, unfortunately, who was as crooked and as corrupt as anybody, was able to convince the American forces at that time, despite the military, our generals saying that he was not a major force in defeating the Japanese, but Mao was. We went along and we went and supported Chiang Kai-shek, who then was fled and went into Taiwan in 1940.
Sure. Stay there. Come back. We got to go to break. Many anthropologists and archaeologists believe that before man even discovered the power to harness and use fire, we were involved in agrarian activities. That is, taking the seeds of plants and then replanting them to produce more. The very foundation of our modern civilization and human culture is centered around the planting and cultivation of edible plants.
Here are some of the amazing deals at InfoWars Seed Center at InfoWarsShop.com.
The Survival Seed Vault by My Patriot Supply features only the finest survival heirloom seeds for a robust and hardy garden, even in the toughest times. We also have starter varieties of the deluxe seed packages or fruit, salad, salsa, peppers, medical herbs, and more.
Go to the InfoWars Seed Center at InfoWarsShop.com.
And remember, the revolution against tyranny is growing. Many anthropologists. Final segment, folks, on the live radio show. But I'll be back tonight. I'm doing a special report on the Nightly News. Nightly News, 7 o'clock Central. If you're not a subscriber to the Nightly News, we're almost up and running with a new studio. Got stations and networks and cable systems wanting to pick it up all over. That's why I'm suspending finishing Obama Deception 2. I got to get the TV thing done. The upgrade of the website's done. The Obama Deception will come out early next year. So we'll make it even better to really understand the whole system, not just Obama. But I'll be back this Sunday live, 4 to 6 p.m. Central, with the live Sunday broadcast as well. So please tell your friends and family to tune in. Defeating this tyranny is about informing others and then resisting and putting pressure on the government and promoting a culture of liberty instead of a culture of collectivism and corruption and domestic militarism as they try to convert us to some type of weird hermit state. In closing, Dr. Steve Pieczenik, stevepieczenik.com. Thank you for coming on with us. We got about 4 or 5 minutes. Other points you'd like to add about the state of the world, the state of our republic, the state of Obama? I think Obama is really rotting like a dead fish politically now, but I'm worried about what he may pull. I just sense the only thing they've got left is big false flags, but all those narratives degenerate now. Cy Hurst says Obama's staging false flags. What are they going to do?
Well, the key element for all of this, and this is why your audience is so important, why you're important, is the fact they cannot default on the debt ceiling. That is the most crucial element, the most important thing we have right now in terms of national security and the viability of the republic. If they default, that means the good faith and credit of the United States government, irrespective of Obama, has gone down. The dollar will be worth nothing. We will literally be the last of a nation, of a great nation, and that cannot happen. But unfortunately, we're playing this tricky game between Republicans and Democrats, and we really have to open up the political culture system, as you said, to more parties. We have to create different parties. I thought the Tea Party would become more independent, less radical, more instructive, more comprehensive, and then we need more pragmatic parties. It's enough. These two parties, Republican and Democrats, have really not been all that different. It's just a game that goes on in the media. But we do really need the beginnings of a discussion, starting with social media at the ground level, which you have instigated and others, to talk about, grassroots politics, building it up, have a pragmatic, independent party that's not affiliated with these nonsensical ideological concepts, resorting back to historical perspectives that no one really understands. If we go back to our founding fathers, first of all, our founding fathers were not Christians in the true sense of the word. They were deists. They did not believe in the notion of putting God in our country. This is going to be very shocking to most of them. Most of them were members of the Masonic Lodge. Even George Washington, if you go back to his history, walked out of the prayers in Episcopal churches. Ben Franklin, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, all were very clear they were deists. But the point of fact was their influences were Montesquieu, they were French revolutionary. They had an idea that our country would come with a give and take of discussion and ideological differences, but it had to be diverse, it had to be constructive, and it had to move our country forward. In many ways, we are not different from what we started with. Many feared that within 30 years of the revolution, we didn't even have a country. And Andrew Jackson was fearful of it. We had many men who fought for our country, but feared that it would not exist. For example, when Lincoln created a war, civil war, there was no reason for the Civil War. That was the reason.
Well, Doc, we're out of time. We're out of time. We'll have to get you back on soon, stevepieczenik.com. George Washington was definitely a Christian. Some of them were deists, though. You are correct about that. Alex Jones here to warn you about some of the most important health information you may ever hear. I'm talking about radiation, radioactive fallout, radioactive particles contaminating the Northern Hemisphere. Conservatively, since the 1940s, the Northern Hemisphere of our planet has more than doubled its background radiation. In fact, that was before Fukushima exploded. Now the levels are going up and up and up. Fish are contaminated in the Pacific, and the FDA, the EPA, and others, they're not worried about it. They've been raising the levels of what they claim is safe radioactive particles. Well, I began to discuss with my wife protecting myself, her, and of course our children. Most importantly, I have 3 small children, ages 10, 9, and 5. Radiation really affects children more than adults because they have fast-growing cells. All the literature is clear on that. And I went and talked to medical doctors, scientists, nuclear physicists, nutritionists, and I said, what's the number one thing I can do to protect my family? And they said, Alex, it's leave the Northern Hemisphere. Go south of the equator. That's where the radiation levels are very, very low. If you look at the wind patterns, the north hardly interacts with the south. And it's unfortunate that we've done this to our planet. So after more than 2 years of research into how to protect my family, looking at all the literature, talking to the experts, across the board they agreed iodine is key, but of the family of iodine, nascent, natural, non-GMO, non-factory iodine that comes from the earth is absolutely paramount for your thyroid and other functions in the body. The literature, the research, it's there. It's not my opinion. It is admitted that iodine is essential for the health of our bodies overall, and nascent iodine is the best form. Now, we're announcing the launch of InfoWarsLife.com, and we're going to bring you scores of products over the next few years that we're researching and developing. But nascent iodine is the first product we're coming out with because it's so important, and it's also listed as a fluoride detoxer. It does so many other things. Your body needs it, and when you don't have enough iodine, forget the radiation, your thyroid absorbs the sodium fluoride and other things. And it's the good iodine, the nascent iodine, that is able to block that and just do so many things for your body and your health. I've been taking it. It's amazing. It's a lot better than coffee, I'm here to tell you. And that's why we are now offering our own nascent iodine that's double the strength, made in the best laboratory that is FDA certified and accredited. And it is double strength at half the price of the leading competitor. You know my rule, bring you the highest quality products at the lowest prices we can, so it's a win-win-win. I believe in you reap what you sow. So not only will you get the best deal on nascent iodine at InfoWarsLife.com for your general health and also for any type of emergencies or disasters, you will also be getting a great deal and supporting the InfoWar and our news operation, promoting the cure for tyranny, the First Amendment, promoting liberty and a rediscovery of the Bill of Rights and Constitution and true Americana that's made this nation so great. So please join me in being among the first to visit InfoWarsLife.com. We've got discounts if you buy the nascent iodine in bulk. I challenge you to try to find a better deal. We have the best deal out there and the best quality. In closing, here is probably the most important point. You don't just take nascent iodine when disaster strikes, when there's some new giant disaster. The Northern Hemisphere is already double what it was 60 years ago with the radioactive background. I believe from the research I've done and the experts I've talked to, it is key to take nascent iodine to protect your thyroid from the radiological disaster that's already happened. And unfortunately, future disasters that will happen. That's why it's important to fill your thyroid up now with the healthy nascent iodine so that the sodium fluoride, the radioactive isotopes, and the rest of it can't get in. That's the key. This is something that across the board has been shown in study after study to be an absolutely essential nutrient in the body. Until a few decades ago, the government put it in the salt because they knew you needed it. But then they took that out, that's good for the thyroid, and put the sodium fluoride in that's bad for it. Talk about eugenics, talk about soft kill, talk about an invisible weapon in the water supply. This stuff is on record as a detoxifier for the fluoride they're adding to our water. Nascent iodine and InfoWars Life Survival Shield in double strength at half the cost of the leading competitors. Please visit InfoWarsLife.com today.